Darling one, you were born from the sweetest love, cast from the fires of creation, burning bright into the making of your perfect constellations. Head high, my love, never let them diminish you. Stand tall in the power of your love. Break open to the thousands come before you, written in your heart with holy blood. Keep going, my love. Hold tight to the scripture of your inheritance, your dreams born from ancient stone. Weave your magic star of wisdom, breathing life into hollow bones. Courage, my love. Place pain upon your sacred altars. Grow seeds where life has become hopeless. Lend hands to those who fall and falter. Let love be life's greatest opus. Welcome, beautiful souls. My name is Tara Brading, and I'm the creator of the Dreaming the Ancestors podcast series, where we talk about remembering and reclaiming ancestral stories, feminine wisdom, and earth magic. This is the 19th episode, and today I'm very excited to welcome Veronica Stanwell to the podcast. Veronica is a multidisciplinary healing and creative arts practitioner and the founder of Rooted Healing, an organization dedicated to deepening kinship with the living world. Rooted Healing offers ancestral immersions, courses, and the Rooted Healing podcast. Veronica's background weaves together an MSc in transpersonal psychology, focused on the role of ceremony, life in an egalitarian community where she co-stewards a 32-acre farm, a deep inquiry into Indigenous healing traditions of the Americas and Mother Europe, a professional grounding in theatre, and a childhood shaped by the wild Welsh lands. Across all of her visioning, she carries a reverence for story, music, expression, catharsis, and playfulness, and a fascination with the wonders of life and our remembered belonging within it. I am so very honored to be here with you, Veronica. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here, and feel free to say hello to everyone.
Oh, yes. Hello, and thank you so much for having me here, Tara. It's a joy.
Thank you, Veronica. And as always, I'd like to take a moment for us all to close our eyes and just imagine that we're having this conversation in the flesh, heart to heart. And we're sitting around a great fire, sitting on the ground in circle. And I invite us to feel that energy of the fire as we come together for this conversation. To really feel how the fire has been this focal point, this gathering place for so many of our ancestors for so many generations. Feeling our hearts weave together, feeling ourselves become receptive to the wisdom of our ancestors, feeling the ancestors gather with us. And I'd like to honor and welcome in our earth-honoring ancestors, the ones who were connected to soil and stone, forest and river, the ancestors who knew how to speak with the animals, to speak in the language of spirit, to feel divine inspiration moving through them in their walk of life. So I'm honoring and welcoming in these earth-honoring ancestors, these ancient elders who hold the medicine of the earth. Falcha, welcome. Shan Shinshur, old ancestors. Honoring all of the beautiful ancestors who are willing and open to being with us today. So the title of this episode is Reviving the Village, the Roundhouse, and the Ancestral Council. And together we're going to explore the ways that community and council can help us to navigate these radical times of change, which seem to feel increasingly chaotic and challenging and overwhelming. And one of the powerful threads of Veronica's work is her passion for hosting these deep ancestral immersions designed to offer an embodied taste of ancestral village life and skills, outlook, and land connection. And she hosts these experiences primarily in Wales, immersed in a rainforest with a reconstructed roundhouse. And though I have never been to one of these gatherings myself, I can absolutely feel the beauty and magic of them. And there's truly something so powerful that happens when we gather together in community with the shared intention of remembering our roots, whether in person or online. And through this gathering together in community, in circle and council, we really become receptive to the guidance of our ancestors and the ancient wisdom that flows through our veins. And I've long been fascinated with the roundhouses of our British and Irish ancestors. And if you've never seen a roundhouse before, I encourage you to look one up right away. Roundhouses are so special. They are these circular ancestral dwellings, which are usually made of wood with wattle and daub panels and topped with a thatched roof. Some roundhouses were woven like baskets. Others were made of stone, so there is some variation, but they always are in the form of a circle, and there was always a hearth inside of them. And to me, the roundhouse represents a time in our ancestral history when we as a people embodied the paradigm of the circle. At least that's what my ancestors have shared with me. A time when sitting in circle and sitting in council was part of everyday life, when tribe and community, ceremony and song, land and lineage was all important. And I feel that one of the greatest challenges of our time is that we have never been more technologically connected and yet so lonely and so divided and so fundamentally disconnected from community, from land, and even our own innate humanness. And for many of you listening, I imagine that you can relate to something that's called hirith in the Welsh language. Veronica, please correct me if I'm saying that wrong.
Hiraeth.
Hiraeth. Thank you. Hiraeth. Thank you. Welsh is not my expertise. And Veronica, you really offer a beautiful description of this, which I'm going to read aloud. Hiraeth is spiritual longing for a home to which you cannot return, or a yearning for home which maybe never was, the nostalgia, the grief for lost place, or the echo of an ancient place from the soul's past, our longing to belong and a sense of once belonging. It can be in the wind, the rocks, the moss, the landscapes lost. So as we journey into this conversation today, may it weave us together in this shared spiritual longing. And I hope that Veronica and I can shed light on some of the ways that we can revive the village, the roundhouse, the ancestral council to help us really root down and connect and meet these challenging times. So, Veronica, to start with, I'd love to hear a bit more about you. Could you tell us how you ended up doing this work of guiding people into connection with the land and the ancestors, and what it was that really drew you to this path?
Yeah, thank you for such a beautifully woven introduction, meandering into this. Yeah, I think my life has been a patchwork or a river of quite acute differences in terms of community and belonging and non-community and non-belonging. So I grew up in West Wales on a beautiful 50-acre farm that me and my single mother stewarded and farmed and tended. And it was a wonderful childhood in many, many ways. I'm so deeply, deeply grateful for the incredible experiences I had growing up with the land and with the more than human kin that kept me company. And I also really want to honor and acknowledge the fractured family and the fractured community, and also being outsiders. My mum's English. I was born in Wales, but there is a strong difference when you live in Wales, when you're Welsh and when you're English. And so there was also this loss or non-belonging and whilst we had community gather for Hay Day, which was one of my most treasured memories in my childhood, I absolutely adored all the neighbors coming to help us harvest the hay. A lot of the time was actually very lonely in the human realm. And I went into theatre, of all places, following a passion for catharsis and play and embodying the other. I think that was a big driving force for that. But that whole career and trajectory really took me away from the land. I ended up living in cities a lot, deep in the hustle. And whilst I was in contracts, in theatre contracts, I experienced beautiful community. We would often live near each other. There was a lot of drama and fun and play. And we were also going through threshold moments together. I didn't have this language back then, but we were being vulnerable on a regular basis and putting ourselves out there. And I think that created a really deep kind of bonding and initiation within us as a community. But outside of those contracts, I had a huge contrast of being and feeling so lonely and isolated and deep in the hustle of productivity as king and all of this. And I've grown up riddled with chronic illness and hit a wall during a particularly isolated spell in between contracts. I've had autoimmunity from a very young age, Graves' disease, and also had cancer when I was 19 and 20. And so I reached my mid-20s and really burnt out, for lack of a better phrase, and followed the many synchronicities and guidances to Indigenous healing traditions. I was offered a very high intervention to, quote unquote, cure my autoimmunity, but it would have made me dependent on medication for the rest of my life. And I just happened to meet people in that point in time who guided me towards the fact that there are other modes of healing traditions and that there are other cosmologies. And that I just was not in my field of awareness. And so that began this deep, deep inquiry of travel and of learning from different Indigenous healing traditions, and understanding and opening my awareness to the vast ways of inhabiting this world and realizing how indoctrinated and corrupt the individualistic Western model is. And quite frankly, learning about colonization, I'm so sad to admit that it wasn't in my awareness. We weren't really taught about it at school. And so that was a huge unlearning and a journey over several years. And coming back to Britain, having experienced these amazing ceremonies and just this culture of belonging and of care, and coming back and feeling the supermarkets and the plastic and the go, 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 rush, 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 individual culture. And so I started seeking moments of connection here on these lands. And I found these magical spaces like Caimabon, where we've been hosting Ancestral, but there's a few other pockets. But what I also found was that there was no one holding ancestral embodied immersions at these incredible sites, at least nothing that I was finding. And I was really craving it. I was going to experiences that were focused on all kinds of things, but they weren't actually rooted in the structures, in the place, in the land, in what we're doing today in society. And so the calling forth came from the Roundhouse. Being in the Roundhouse, I had these incredible dreams every night of agitation. They were really symbolic. There were red ants crawling out from the central fire, and my drum frame lost its wooden frame and became saggy. And there was a lot of symbolism guiding me to revive the integrity, the bones of an experience where we remember belonging in the body and where we actually inhabit it, and not in a way where we're kind of reenacting battles or, there's a place for that as well, but in a way where we're carrying forth this wisdom that we access through that embodiment. And also recognizing there's a lot of intellectualization, a lot of abstract thought about Celtic ancestors or latching on to a particular point in time, but really craving almost not a totally wordless space. We bring in the bardic tradition and story and words and counsel, of course. I know will be a big part of this conversation as well. But just the embodied remembering felt so, so important in a world that's become rather disconnected from body, including that of the body of place. So that's my meandering path to this point.
Thank you, love. I really honor your journey and those initiatory moments that led you to this embodied remembering of the ancestral way and belonging and connection to land. And I had full body chills when you were talking about the dreams you were having in the Roundhouse. So, so special and so powerful. I love too that you created something that you wanted for yourself, right? It's like you wanted community, you wanted these immersions, which you couldn't find. And similar to you, I've, created offerings from that place. There's a magic to creating something that our soul is longing for. And so I really honor that you've done that in such a beautiful way. And I would love to hear more about what it's like to gather together in community, on the land, in council, in the Roundhouse. What happens both on a physical and spiritual level so that people can really imagine it.
Oh, well, there's this sense of arrival, and Hiraeth essentially is what called us all there. So there's a deep longing that we arrive with and we settle in with, and the nervous system takes a moment to adjust and drop in. But the councils we hold when we're together, there's 3 pillar councils, and the first one is about connecting with our ancestors and feeling the hearth and going on a journey to meet our ancestors and to share from that place, share any wisdom that's coming through. Maybe there's poetry and song, but it's quite a tender opening. Oh, and I also should mention we make village agreements, which is a huge inquiry and part of the process. So I've obviously collected a proper bundle of village agreements that I carry into all the gatherings we hold, but it's a co-created process. So it invites people to really explore, if we're an equal village, even if just for a week, how would we actually interact? What are our agreements? What are our boundaries? What are our needs? And that in itself can be pretty revolutionary. Just hearing those and adjusting and changing how we interact in such a way, and considering the land as well. What does the land need? What's the land's boundaries and agreements? So that first council, we connect with the ancestors and go on this beautiful journey. And the Roundhouse, one of the ways we do that is we bow drill our first fire, which in the temperate rainforest of North Wales is sometimes quite an edgy undertaking as someone who's hosting and facilitating the experience. Last year, for example, it took us an hour and a half to really nurture that ember with enough care and diligence to actually make it into the huge grandfather flame that he became. But it's so potent to simply remember what we have to do to bring that flame into life. And we shared a song that we sung in rounds. And when the fire finally erupted and we fell into silence and just this crackling and absolutely magnificent, I had one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. There's something there in itself, in that wordless space. And that's where we contact the ancestors, I believe. And the second council, we gather and we look at now, what's happening right now, what's our yearning, where's our compass, what's our joy, how do we bring this amazing experience that we're having into the world, what's really activating, where are those truth bumps rising, in which moments, where is our when, that source of inspiration that can move through us. And then the third Roundhouse is becoming ancestors. So can we begin to reorientate ourselves in the spiral of life rather than an individual in one life, not thinking too much? I mean, obviously parents come to these as well, and they've got a different transformed perspective around the next generation. But can we really think about the next 7+ generations? And one of the most powerful things I've heard in that council, for example, is a woman sharing that my service to the future generations is not having children and ending this line of deep trauma and abuse. It ends here with me, and I'm giving forward through these wonderful projects that she works on. And that was, that was hard to listen to, but this is the kind of stuff that can come through. of course, a lot of us are, do still want to bring forth the next generation, but it's a really diverse, deep space. And those councils are nestled in mornings, very spacious mornings of skill shares. So there might be a small group kind of creating village life, a small group learning to use the bow drill, a small group learning something simple like nettle cordage, a small group spinning with wool, which of course, sheep only came about 4,000 years ago. But once they did come, they were a huge part of our ancestors' lifeways, and just smelling the lanolin, smelling the different textures, busying our hands. One of my favorite local teachers and craftswoman, amazing ancestral artist, Dory Joy, she was recently at my home and we were having lunch together. We had just done a drum birth ceremony for a private ancestral immersion I was organizing. And it was really special. And we were talking about just the act of reverently busying our hands in these sacred crafts and how soothing it is for the whole being, a whole spirit. And she said something like, I wish I quoted her and immediately wrote down what she said, but she said something like, yes, it was the moment in time where we stopped having busy hands that we started our neurosis. We started this terrible legacy of too much abstract thought. And actually, it's through our hands, which are expressions of our hearts, that we remember how woven we are with place, which is why I love weaving. I love spinning and these crafts that bring us back. So that's essentially what it is, with a lot of bardic story and song and discussion and silence, and also trying to access the ancient sounds and words of our ancestors. I love Carolyn Hillier. She's another local elder who I know has been on your podcast. I love that episode. I share it with a lot of people. And she has this amazing roundhouse in the middle of Dartmoor and shares proto-Celtic words that she's really polished off and brought out by the hearthside and given back to this community of women who are doing this work. And so it's a humble movement here, but it's definitely got some spice in it and it's really picking up. And I think a lot of people are seeking out these experiences where we can respond to our heraeth.
Yes, amazing. Hearing you talk about all of these beautiful councils and experiences and the crafting and the weaving of the wool, it just, really awakens something so deep in my soul. And so I can just imagine and feel how beautiful those experiences are. Yeah, and really feeling the power of land and the power of the roundhouse, holding these in-person immersions, right? And the roundhouse to me is so, as I've already shared, is so special because it holds such a pure essence of that way of life. Again, that paradigm of the circle. And interestingly, I've had these really deep experiences of leading women into the roundhouse online. I'm hearing you talk about doing it in person, and also, we can enter that space in a liminal way, right? So we can journey ourselves into this ancestral dwelling, this ancestral space where we can connect to that council of elders, those wise grandmothers. And as I've led these experiences over the years, it's just amazing to see how many mystical and magical experiences women have in this space, even, in an ethereal way. And what I really understand is that we're reviving this ancestral space together. And even though we're not in a physical roundhouse doing this, we are reviving the memory of it in our DNA and reweaving its wisdom. So I'd love to ask you, as someone who's also really connected to that space, and especially in a physical way, when you're in the roundhouse and you're in communion with the ancestors, what kind of guidance are the ancestors giving for these specific times? What are they asking of us? I have my own sense of this, of course, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
For me, the wisdom so deeply comes through the body. Like the body remembers, the body tingles, our bodies tell us everything we need to know. And there's something about being in the roundhouse, whether it's listening to stories or dreaming with the harp or being in council with that hearth. It's about relationality. It's about meeting everyone's needs. And it's about living with the richest life we can imagine. And what I mean by that is rich in intimacy with the land, rich in intimacy with our relationships, of our practices, of our skills, our crafts. There's a kind of life way that is offered to us that we tend not to pick up and take because of the distractions of modernity and the pull towards productivity and the machine's version of productivity. We can be deeply, deeply productive in our ancestral life ways, but there's a pull back to want for less, and that's a poor expression. It's to want for a richer life, but richer in experience and intimacy with a capital I, rather than this rushing into richness of material wealth and gain. And true wealth is definitely in the bellies of our brothers and sisters and our neighbors and our families. And I think for me, I'm having the biggest message to live intergenerationally, which I am. And I'm so grateful to have found a really amazing community, an intergenerational community, about 34 adults and children, co-stewarding a farm. And there's something that modernity tries to do, these systems of industrialization, which is a kind of monoculture, a homogenization of diversity, of culture, of ecology, of the human spirit. And our ancestors are deeply asking us to remember the joy we once knew, being in deep relationship with place and with each other, and with the more than human land community that we share our homes with and we share where we dwell with. And with that definitely comes a calling to slow down, which I know is a big thing that you share as well. These messages are just really received in the body, and then the body complains a lot when we forget.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, that is definitely one of the messages that the ancestors share with me around what you said specifically about slowing down. So when I, sit in council with the ancestors, especially when I'm feeling the chaos of the world and the heartbreak of the world, and seeing all of the, intergenerational trauma living out in real time, and seeing traumas that will affect the future generations. When I then sit in council in those moments, the message that I often get is the importance of slowing down in the urgency of these times. So yes, there is crisis. Yes, there is violence and desecration. Yes, we must act, but we must also slow down and listen and be in communion with life and each other, and remember that we're relational beings. And to live in a relational way is to be in council with our human and non-human kin. And so this is a huge thing that's been coming through for me. I've been taking a lot of time off this past month. And so I've been really feeling that and living into the importance of taking sacred pause and being in the ceremony of our lives and calling back that ceremonial way to be in relationship and to slow down, even amidst all of the crises. So I'd love to hear your reflections on this, to continue these threads. So from your perspective, what does it mean to revive the ancestral council? And how can we live in this more relational way that honors the need for council and communion and relationship?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. Yeah, thank you for naming that piece, because actually a huge piece that the ancestors, I feel, are asking of us is to remember how to grieve. And that's become a big part of our work as grief tending. And just so grateful to those root teachers, Malidoma Some and Subumfu Some and Francis Weller. It's such a recent passage from West Africa to these Wise Isles and yonder. So that's a huge piece as well, because if we don't slow down and we don't pause and we don't give ourselves the experience of remembering council and remembering being with the land, then we numb ourselves. We can't actually fully touch our grief. And if we can't fully touch our grief, we're not very likely to act. And action, I think, can be many different expressions. I don't personally enjoy the immense shaming that happens in the social media realm just with our community, our collective. I think we need to really call people in to feel and to honor the role that the protective numbing has, but to say, okay, no, now we need to slow down and feel. So I think counsel plays a big role in that sitting in circle and being together and actually being vulnerable and witnessing and practicing the art of deep listening again, because there's an attunement to place that I think we all innately have when we live in close relationship with the land, that we can really listen and we can pick up a lot of energy and read people and read animals that we lose in our fast-paced modern lives. And so to relearn the art of deep listening is also revolutionary. And witnessing ourselves in the other. There's a beautiful practice bringing in the bardic tradition and the bardic fire, where we go into a stream of consciousness and explore some poetry. And through listening to these poems that bridge the understory, the undercurrent, and hearing someone articulate something that we couldn't articulate that is true in ourselves is extremely validating, but also connecting. And I believe that there's a huge role in these spaces that are as diverse as possible. I know that's something in the healing arts, I suppose, that is something we all have a lot of responsibility to try and do and call in. Because in that diversity, we begin to practice and learn the art of meeting different needs and meeting different yearnings and griefs, and going from personality to humanity, going from the conditioned self into our deeper seat of humility. The council is huge. I mean, where I live now, we are actually an egalitarian community. No one else calls it that, but I adopted that word from interviewing Bruce Parry a while back, and his time spent with the Penan, who are egalitarian Indigenous group. Because everyone's needs matter as much as everyone else's, and the art of our togetherness is trying to meet all of those needs, as well as caring for the land and for the animals. And that does mean that some decisions happen more slowly than in our individual lives. And it can be frustrating, but it by far outweighs the sorrow of loneliness and of, selfish pursuits or whatever, for lack of better words right now. Our ancestral immersions have deeply guided me to live where I live now. And I know there's a strong argument for, well, we can't all do that. We can't all go back to the land. We can't all live in mud huts. And I love Helena Norberg Hodge, who runs Local Futures and spent a long time with people in the DAC. She's amazingly articulated at debunking that fallacy. I can't do anywhere near as justice to it, but there is a sense that we don't have to all go back to mud huts, but we absolutely can return to the land and return to each other. And that will have many different expressions. That won't all be intentional communities. In fact, there's a huge role. When I hear stories of people knocking down their fences in their back gardens because the whole neighborhood is united and would like to share one great collective garden and grow food together, those stories are so amazing. And the Transition Towns network and all of these movements towards different expressions of how we actually know our community and show up for our community. So the council really has helped me bring this into my life, and it's absolutely incredible. And I want to instill in people the seed of possibility that if there is deep yearning and that if there is loneliness, it doesn't have to stay like this forever. There are so many people seeking to live in deeper intimacy with people in place, that you can find them and create a life that's more beautiful than you could possibly imagine. It's so available to us. And I think it's through the council that we can actually also dream together and remember and allow ourselves to vision in that way, in a collective spirit and way, and seek guidance. All of those threads are so beautiful. And
I'm really honoring that seed of possibility that you spoke to, and how this communal way of living, this more relational way of living, can take many different forms. So, for example, I live in a very small kind of community. My father-in-law and one of my best friends lives on our land. We each have our own little houses. So, it's me and my husband and our dogs, my father-in-law and my friend. And it's so precious and so beautiful because there is a sense of community, and it's also very intimate and very much feels like a family, right? Most of us are a family. Just wanted to give that example as just a little way, that we can imagine this kind of communal living. Like, it doesn't have to be on a farm like you're doing, Veronica, right? And it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can just be a small little something. And yeah, as we're speaking about this, I can also feel, this deeper longing for more intentional relationship and community, and for that to take different forms in my own life. And what I've really noticed is that so many people, including myself, want to be in council and want to be in community in a variety of different ways, especially in the context of the human connection that we all crave, right? But with this sort of seemingly endless demand of modern life, sometimes there's barely enough time to stop and breathe, let alone build a village. And this is why there's such an epidemic of isolation right now. And I think this isolation undoubtedly makes us more fearful and more anxious about the polycrisis of these times. And so I'd love to explore this with you from that place of, honoring this seed of possibility, like what could community look like? And also this very real pressure and stress and demand of the modern paradigm. And so I'd love to ask you, how can we attempt to navigate all of this? And what have you really learned on your journey?
It's definitely an ongoing inquiry and process and a shedding, because the conditioning is very deep that we are not enough, that we're not doing enough, we're not creating enough. And that makes us work harder and longer. And there's so many different ways that we have been conditioned to have that core fundamental belief about ourselves and our lives. So I think that's, ironically, without it being a self-centered pursuit, it does begin with the self, it does begin with the body, with understanding our nervous system, understanding how to slow down when enough is enough, and the radical resistance of, I think, living more simply. If we've caught ourselves into webs where we have to pay a huge amount of rent or mortgage, or we just have signed up to too many different things, and if that's going on, then there is a call to lessen that so that you can slow down and maybe take an extra day of work, or I don't know. I don't know if I'm going into too many specifics, but I think at some point along the way, we either make the decision spontaneously through a seed of inspiration, or our body will speak for us, which mind has done multiple times. We'll get ill, we won't be able to continue at the pace we're going, and we simply have no choice but to step away, to shed another layer of the constructed ego and regenerate. And one thing that I am so deeply inspired by is spending deep time in nature, and not just a walk here or a glance there or a little trip here, but really deep time and interacting and playing a role in that ecosystem. I find a lot of active hope there, because there's just this immense capacity for regeneration and healing. And we're made of that same fabric. And so even when we are running around A to B and we're deeply yearning for that human connection, and we are burning ourselves out, just trusting that if you stop, if you slow, if you seek spaces of connection and experiences of connection, you are nature. You have the power and the immense life force to find a way. And there's so many different expressions. I love this meditation that you can do where you imagine yourself as a seed and you grow and you sort of figure out what kind of plant you are. Are you a sunflower? Are you a vine? Are you a grass? Like, there's so many ways we can relate and experience ourselves, and from that can also be a guidance in how we return. So I relate a lot with vines, and I feel like I need a lot of different creative projects, and I want to contact a lot of different things. And sometimes that does need to be managed. And my partner is wonderful at that, at saying, I think you're taking too much on. And so once we come into deeper communion and relationality with the people around us, they can also calibrate us in our different expressions as well. It's a lifelong journey, isn't it? The journey into, and we have to acknowledge that we are in, you've said, a polycrisis. We are in challenging times, and a lot of us who are listening to this podcast and us two recording this podcast, we have a certain level of ease and privilege, and like, thank you for the gifts of this life, for being well and being able to converse and connect and use this technology as an interim, I would say, because I do vision a future where we've remembered how to grow our food again, and we've remembered the joys of collecting seeds, and we've remembered what it means to sing together, not for how our voices sound, but for the joy of singing in relationality to the river, to the mountain, to the trees. But if you're rushing and miss out on those moments of connection, we will regret that in our dying days, because this life is precious. This life is so, so precious. And I've read this reading a few times, but I have to just offer it. So Francis Weller is one of my favorite writers. And in The Wild Edge of Sorrow, he wrote, "Our soul knows we are designed for a bigger, more sensuous life and more imaginative life. But we can go for days, weeks, months, a lifetime with only marginal encounters with beauty and the wild, only rarely sharing an intimate moment with a friend. We collude in the numbing as well, slipping into the void through alcohol, drugs, shopping, television, work, anything to help us ward off the feelings of emptiness that come crashing at our door. We were not meant to live shallow lives, pocketed by meaningless routines and the secondary satisfactions of happy hour. We are the inheritors of an amazing lineage, rippling with memories of life lived intimately with bison and gazelle, raven and the night sky. We are designed to encounter this life with amazement and wonder, not resignation and endurance. And this is at the very heart of our grief and sorrow." And hiraeth. The dream of full-throated living, woven into our very being, has often been forgotten and neglected, replaced by a societal fiction of productivity and material gain. No wonder we seek distractions. Every sorrow we carry extends from the absence of what we require to stay engaged in this one wild and precious life. And every sorrow is made more difficult to metabolize by that absence. It just says it. That's it. We are inheritors of an amazing lineage.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Those words moved me so deeply. So, so deeply. Thank you. That full-throated living, such a beautiful way to express that. So I have one more question for you. So first of all, I will share that one of the core teachings that the ancestors have given me over the years is the importance of right relationship, reciprocity, and the gift of giving. And I feel that all of these things are essential to creating meaningful community, counsel, reweaving ourselves into the web of life that we belong to. And I know that gifting forward is something that matters to you as well, rooted in this understanding that our collective wellness is interconnected. So I'd love to hear how you practice this inside of your organization, Rooted Healing, and also in your own life.
It can be as small and simple as giving thanks to Bramble for the incredible, juicy blackberries that are offered every year. And that active relationship, I think, is what so many Indigenous teachers are sharing with us. It's a relationship of respect and reverence and of giving thanks and of giving something back, even if that's a song or if that's watering the tree that you just harvested some nuts from. In rooted healing, it's an ongoing exploration of how we create these ecosystems of support. And at the moment, we have models where we gather and we're hiring a beautiful space, and we're in a model where the gathering costs money to attend, and we have online courses as well. That we're trying to make this work actually pay us what we need to live simply with the land. And of course, that creates barriers for many people. So we try and advocate gifting forward. And actually, it's been a beautiful practice at the end of many of our gatherings. There is a really heart-opening space and this wanting and desire to support others in entering these spaces. And so we have a bursary program where people have actually funded full places and multiple places. So that's been really joyful. And just to name that this might not be the forever model. This is a model where we're working with the land access we have and all these different components. We're really keen to build a roundhouse on the farm here, and that would be paradigm changing in terms of rooted healing's offerings. And also, I feel like there's a responsibility when we gather in these spaces to plant seeds of going forth of how, okay, we have gathered together this bundle of gifts, this bag of medicine, and now our work is to take it into our local community and into everyday life. And so that's the intention, is that we create these moments that are fleeting, but actually they are cross-pollinating a culture of care, a culture of ceremony, a culture of belonging. That feels like a beautiful way to give back. And the stories that come rippling back to us are also really beautiful, and that's what keeps me going. And then we have the Rooted Healing podcast, which, as you know, podcasts are wonderful things to do. I absolutely love that direct transmission from interviewing people, but they're also a lot of work. So that's also a little bundle of gifts we offer to the world. And we do our own research, which at the moment has been very focused on psilocybin use, which is obviously the scientific name for sacred mushrooms, magic mushrooms, because the clinical model is very focused on the individual therapeutic discourse, 2 therapists, 1 patient, and a filmed session. And we've tried to contribute research to the group nature-based model and to try and give voice and encourage models that actually integrate Indigenous teachers, and that we can actually start to look at this as a collective healing experience and not a psychological individual one. So that's been another way of giving back, because that has been a lot of work. A bit of a jump in the deep end, because I left school at 16. So suddenly having to, conduct a scientific research project, that's quite a culture shock. But there's so many different ways. We also sponsor biodiversity, and we plant lots of trees on the land here and at some of the venues we've gathered at. We've also done that, but of course, the tending the tree is actually where the crux of it is. So we do a lot of that as well. And a big question for me is, what is Rooted Healing's role in showing up for the broader, more collective crises, for Gaza, for Sudan, for the Congo, for just the web of horror that we have contact with through these online spaces. And that's something in my personal life I'm quite invested in.
Yes, thank you. So beautiful to hear about the ways you're tending that web of connection and that spirit of reciprocity and respect and giving forward and what have you. And yeah, I think I'll share too, from my perspective, how I weave this into my life and my, quote, business. I have had a strong passion for tree planting for quite a long time. I used to work for an organization called Tree Sisters, who I really love and respect. Worked for them for 2 years. And so for my offering, the Roundhouse, which is for women with Irish ancestry, I donate a portion of the proceeds to tree planting in Ireland, because Ireland has been incredibly deforested and colonization has had a huge part in that. So everyone who comes into the Roundhouse, either they stay for 3 months or for 12 months, and they get a tree planted every month that they're in the Roundhouse on their behalf. So that's one of the ways that I love to give back to our ancestral lands of Era in particular. And then I do a lot of financial giving, which I really see as reparations as a spiritual practice. And I especially focus on Indigenous people here on Turtle Island. There's an organization called NDN Collective, which I really love and support, and they're big into land back and sovereignty of the land and sovereignty of Indigenous peoples. And often I will try to give on days like Thanksgiving or 4th of July or what have you, in that spirit of reparations. And then lately, over the past, almost 2 years now, I've been giving a lot to Gaza and supporting families with fundraising and things. And then I also have been involved with my friends' initiative in the Amazon and the protection of their Indigenous lands and the protection of the forest, and also tree planting there. So my activism has been a bit all over the place and really has tended to that collective web you were speaking to. And also, I'm really in this moment where I'm kind of going into a phase of dreaming into what my reciprocity and ancestral activism might look like moving forward. And so I'm always trying to follow that inner calling and that impulse of what the ancestors are asking of me. And I do feel like something is shifting inside of me around what that's going to look like moving forward. I feel like there's a new chapter beginning, but that's historically what I've been doing. And we'll see what the ancestors want to call me into next. Yeah, but I loved hearing about your sacred ancestral activism, because it's, inspiring to talk to others who are of that mindset and to hear these different ideas, right? Especially in this moment where I'm dreaming with what is really being asked of me next. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And it's so needed in the healing arts. I think that's part of my drive for rooted healing was, what does a rooted healing practice look like? Because there can be a lot of unrootedness in the healing arts and a lack of reciprocity.
Yeah, I think that it's important to acknowledge that a lot of New Age spirituality is very focused on the self, right? And so this is always a question in my mind of like, how do we actually make our healing more collective? And how do we acknowledge our privilege, as you spoke to earlier? And how do we reckon with the systemic harms and the ways that we benefit from that, right? Or we're complicit in that, or what have you. So yeah, it's become more and more important to me over the years, and taken different shapes and forms. But I feel that this is so key. And, we can't talk about counsel and relationship without talking about this piece, right? And it can take many forms. Otherwise, it's a bit hypocritical, right? To say, oh, relationship, healing, community, and then not talk about the wider impact of that and our interconnection to the bigger story of what's going on right now. So yeah, that feels important.
Absolutely. There's a huge synergy with what happened in Ireland and what's happening in Gaza, actually. Ireland, they had every capacity to give the food that was grown on the land to the people who were starving, but they sent it away for trade and blocked those corridors, so to speak. And it was a huge, Ireland, I'm sure I know you know all of this, but Ireland hasn't recovered its population from the potato, what some might call the potato genocide, the really denying people of the food they had grown. And you don't have to go that far back. Less than 100 years ago, children were abused at school for speaking Welsh. And this desire to oppress and homogenize and how embedded that can be in our practices without us even realizing. So yeah, there's a lot of work and crossover with ancestral connection.
Yeah, and we've been talking so much about our earth honoring ancestors who were connected to place and lived in the paradigm of the circle. And we have these ancestors who did not live that way and who were involved with these different forms of oppression or were being oppressed or what have you. And I hold, as many people listening will know, English and Irish ancestry. And so I'm always, looking at things going on in the world from both of those perspectives, right? Like feeling my Irish ancestors, responding to like what is happening in Gaza as an example. And I've, talked about the similarities as you just talked about on my social media and things and newsletter and what have you, because there are parallels and it's important to see those similarities to help move us into action, right? Like our ancestors are literally, crying out for us to do something and to speak out on this and to take action where we can. And also to look at the English ancestry for me is important too. And that important reckoning and like, how do we reckon with the harm that was done and also the ongoing harm that's happening, right? So yeah, the reckoning and the remembering, I always talk about this because both are important. And again, we've been talking so much about the remembering, but the reckoning is so, so important as well. And I love that you also feel a resonance for that and the importance of that too.
And there's definitely more work to do.
Always, there's always more work to do. And the ancestors can be such beautiful guides in how to navigate all of that without overwhelming ourselves or pushing into burnout, to explore our edges, which sometimes are further than we think, right? It's like we can do more than we think we can. And that's a good thing to lean into and also to know where the hard boundary is. So yeah, it's something I'm exploring so much in my own life in so many different ways. So thank you, love. Is there anything that you'd like to say to finish? Is there any final wisdom you want to share?
Yeah, just welcoming everyone who is listening into it, and just welcoming your haraith, welcoming your efforts, welcoming and honoring the fact that you care. And may we all find these moments of connection, of belonging, of counsel that guide us, that let us access that inner compass where we know the path and the way forward when we listen deeply. It's all in our body and in our collective experience. And to just offer this prayer, I suppose, that yearning is answered, and that yearning, that compass, can guide us towards these practices and cultures of care and cultures of belonging and cultures of renewal and reclamation, as you were saying. And a prayer for Awen, a prayer for inspiration, that we don't lose hope.
It feels so important and such a beautiful note to end on. And I'd love to give you this opportunity, Veronica, just to share a little bit about where people can find you, any projects you're working on that you'd like people to know about, and just any other information about what you offer so people can go and look up your beautiful work in the world.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, Tara. I'm a big fan of your work and just in awe of everything you're sharing, and it's a real honor to sit with you and be in conversation. I hope it's the beginning of future weavings. That's also a prayer. Yes, you can find Rooted Healing at rootedhealing.org, and everything's there. Our gatherings, our podcast, our courses. We currently run a year-long online course called Deepen Your Roots, and it's an animistic deep ecology that reweaves people back with place and back with the more than human world in ceremony and ritual, but also in some nerdy things like bioregionalism, localization, and systems of sustenance. It's a really rich offering with a council and special guests every moon, and I love it. It's become a core part of what we're doing, and I do that with Ben Stopford. So it's a lovely collaboration. But yes, you can find everything at rootedhealing.org, and do follow along, subscribe to the newsletter and all that jazz. I very rarely send things out. I'm really bad at all of that. So when you do hear, it's usually something nice to have a look at.
Honoring you so much, and so grateful for our conversation, and also holding the prayer of future weavings. So that feels really beautiful. And I'd love to just invite all of us to close our eyes for a final few moments, re-envisioning ourselves around that hearth fire, that ancestral fire of kinship and belonging. And I'd like to honor all of the ancestors that we called in at the beginning, honoring those earth-honoring ancestors who've been with us this entire time, honoring all of the ancestors who've shown up for this conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you all for listening and for being with us. And it's such a joy to share these podcasts and to talk to beautiful guests like Veronica, and to feel and see and hear these different perspectives of how we can remember our ancestral ways. So, honoring you, Veronica, thank you again. And thank you, everyone, for listening. You've been listening to Dreaming the Ancestors with Tara Brading. My passion is connecting women to the wisdom of their ancestors, specializing in ancestral feminine wisdom from Ireland and England. If you feel called to connect with your Irish ancestry in an embodied, spiritual, feminine way, I lovingly invite you to sign up for my free reclamation journey, which includes a 90-minute video to connect with your Irish ancestry and ancient heritage. And if you hear the call to connect with your English ancestry, I have a 3-hour introductory workshop called Women of the Wells. You can find these offerings at tara-wild.com/get started. To spell that out, that's TARA-WILD.com/get started.